when the 72-year-old woman won millions in the lottery. She didn't buy a mansion, didn't take luxury cruises, didn't tell a soul. She kept living in the same worn house, even bowed her head to ask family for help with a small sum. But instead of love, she received contempt and insults. They didn't know that every bitter word was weaving into a ruthless, precise revenge plan. And when it began to unfold, no one in that house would see it coming. My name is Margaret Hill, and at 72 years old, I've learned that the worst betrayals come from those who share your blood. I sit here in what used to be my sanctuary, now turned into a gilded cage, watching the morning light filter through dusty curtains that my daughter-in-law Tiffany refuses to let me clean. She says I'd just make more of a mess, her voice dripping with that particular brand of sweetness that conceals venom. 3 years ago, I sold my cozy apartment in downtown Portland to help my eldest son, Daniel, save his business from bankruptcy. The economy had hit his construction company hard, and watching my boy pace his living room at 2 a.m, shoulders bent with the weight of potential ruin, broke something in me. "Mom, I don't know what to do," he'd whispered, and I'd made my decision right then. $400,000, nearly everything from the sale, went straight into keeping his company afloat. "It's just temporary, Mom," Daniel had promised, his eyes bright with relief and what I'd mistaken for gratitude. "Once we're back on our feet, we'll set you up somewhere nice. You'll see." That was before the lottery ticket, before I learned that luck could be both a blessing and a curse. I'd bought it on a whim at the corner store, the same place I'd been getting my Sunday paper for 40 years. The cashier, young Marcus, who always called me Miss M, had joked that I looked lucky that day. I'd laughed, tucking the ticket into my wallet between grocery receipts and expired coupons. When those numbers came up 2 weeks later, all 6 of them, lined up like soldiers, I'd sat in stunned silence for 3 hours, checking and rechecking until my eyes burned. $8.7 million after taxes, enough to change everything, enough to reveal everything. But I kept quiet. Some instinct, honed by years of teaching elementary school children to read between the lines of their parents' behavior, told me to wait, to watch, to see who my family really was when they thought I had nothing left to give. The house I live in now, Daniel and Tiffany's suburban McMansion, feels like a museum where I'm an unwelcome exhibit. I have the smallest bedroom, barely larger than a walk-in closet, at the end of the hall. They'd cleared it out grudgingly, Tiffany sighing dramatically about losing her craft room, though I'd never seen her craft anything except excuses and complaints. Every morning, I wake at 5:30, my joints protesting the thin mattress they'd found at a garage sale. I make breakfast for everyone, careful to brew Daniel's coffee exactly how he likes it, strong, with just a splash of cream. I pack lunches, do laundry, tend the garden that Tiffany takes credit for when her book club comes over. I pay for groceries with my teacher's pension, buy gas for my 20-year-old Honda Civic that Daniel keeps threatening to put out of its misery, and quietly cover the electric bill when I notice the past due notices. They think I don't see the eye rolls when I forget where I put my reading glasses. They think I don't hear the whispered conversations about what to do with Mom when they believe I'm napping. They think I don't notice how they introduce me to their friends. Daniel's mother lives with us. The emphasis on lives with us, making it clear I'm a burden they've graciously shouldered. Last week, I overheard Tiffany on the phone with her sister. "She's getting worse," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Yesterday, she put salt in the sugar bowl. Daniel thinks it might be time to look into facilities." I hadn't mixed up anything, but I let them think I had. The lottery ticket sits in a safety deposit box at a bank across town, along with the claim form I've yet to submit. Every time I drive past that bank, I feel its presence like a heartbeat. $8.7 million, enough to buy my own house, hire help, live comfortably until my last breath. Enough to never have to see the flash of irritation in my son's eyes when I ask him to repeat something I didn't quite hear. But I wait. I watch. I catalog every sigh, every dismissive wave, every moment they treat me like a ghost haunting my own life. Because I've decided that when I finally claim that money, when I finally reveal what I've been hiding, I want to know exactly who I'm dealing with. The woman who raised Daniel, who taught him to tie his shoes and read his first words, who sat through endless little league games and school plays. That woman would have given them everything without question. But the woman I've become, the one they've shaped with their casual cruelty and calculated neglect, she's learning that sometimes the best revenge is patience. And I've become very, very patient. The dinner table was set with Tiffany's wedding china, the kind she only brought out when she wanted to impress someone or remind us all of her refined taste. Tonight, it was just the three of us. But something in the air felt different. I'd spent the afternoon at the doctor's office, a routine checkup that revealed my blood pressure was elevated, likely from stress. Though I didn't mention that part to anyone. "The car's making that noise again," I said quietly, cutting into my overcooked chicken breast. Tiffany always insisted on cooking dinner on Fridays, her culinary skills limited to turning every piece of meat into leather. "The mechanic says it needs new brake pads, and I have another appointment with Dr. Morrison next week. I was wondering if I could borrow $300 until my next pension check." The silence that followed could have choked someone. Daniel set down his fork with deliberate precision, the small clink against the plate sounding like a gavel. Tiffany laughed, not a real laugh, but that tinkling, artificial sound she'd perfected over years of suburban politics. "Oh, Margaret," she said, shaking her head like I was a child who'd asked for a pony. "You know, it's really quite something. Every month it's something new, isn't it? The car, the doctor, always something." "I pay for the groceries," I reminded her, keeping my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "And the electric bill last month when we were having a tough month. Yes, we remember," Tiffany interrupted, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "But honestly, Margaret, at some point we need to talk about the elephant in the room. You've been living here for 3 years now. 3 years of us taking care of you, and it's always something more you need." I watched my son, waiting for him to defend me, to remember who paid for his college, who mortgaged her future for his present. But Daniel just stared at his plate, pushing peas around like a guilty schoolboy. "She's right, Mom," he finally said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe it's time we had a real conversation about your situation. You're forgetting things more often. Last week you left the stove on, and Thursday you called me 3 times asking the same question about garbage day." I hadn't forgotten anything. The stove incident was Tiffany leaving her tea kettle on, but I'd taken the blame silently. The phone calls were because he'd given me 3 different answers about when to put the bins out. "You know," Tiffany leaned forward, her voice taking on that false concern that made my skin crawl. "There are some lovely assisted living communities nearby, places where you'd have friends your own age, activities, medical staff on hand. Wouldn't that be nice? Instead of being cooped up here, being a..." She paused, pretending to search for words. "Well, being such a burden on everyone." The word hung in the air like a slap. Burden. After everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given, I was reduced to a single ugly word. Daniel finally looked up, and something in his eyes made my heart break all over again. "Mom, we've actually been looking into places. Sunset Manor has an opening next month. They have payment plans, and with your pension and Social Security..." "You've been looking," I interrupted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Without talking to me?" "Well, someone has to make the hard decisions," Tiffany said, reaching for her wine glass. "You're clearly not capable of making them yourself anymore. This forgetfulness, this constant need for money, it's not normal. Margaret, a good mother would want what's best for her family. Wouldn't she? Instead of dragging everyone down with her." I felt in my pocket for my phone, making sure the recording app was still running. I'd started recording our conversations 2 weeks ago, after Tiffany had denied saying I was circling the drain to her book club friends. "I see," I said quietly. "And what happens to the money from my pension and Social Security after you put me in this home?" Daniel's face flushed. "That would go toward your care. Obviously, these places aren't cheap. Mom, We'd probably have to supplement it ourselves. Actually, another expense we can't really afford. But what choice do we have? The lie was so smooth, I almost admired it. I knew exactly how much Sunset Manor cost. I'd called them myself last month out of curiosity. My pension and Social Security would more than cover it, with several $100s left over each month. Money that would, no doubt, find its way into their accounts. So, I said, folding my napkin carefully, no help with the car or the doctor. Mom, you need to start being realistic about your situation, Daniel said, finally finding his voice now that he was backed by his wife's cruelty. You're 72 years old. You have no savings, no assets, nothing but that old car and what we give you out of the goodness of our hearts. Maybe instead of always asking for more, you should be grateful for what you have. I stood slowly, my knees protesting. You're right, I said. I should be grateful. Grateful that I finally see things clearly. As I walked to my room, I heard Tiffany stage whisper, "See, I told you she's getting paranoid too. We need to move quickly before she completely loses it." In my room, I stopped the recording and saved it to the cloud account my nephew had helped me set up last year. Then I sat on my garage sale mattress and pulled out the lottery ticket from its hiding place behind a loose baseboard. $8.7 million. Enough to buy Sunset Manor itself if I wanted, but I wouldn't need to, because I had different plans now. Plans that would teach them the real cost of treating family like a burden to be discarded. They wanted to put me away, to take my meager income and pat themselves on the back for their charity. They had no idea that the burden they were so eager to cast off was about to become their worst nightmare. I put the ticket back and began making a list. Tomorrow, I would call Ethan Cross. It was time to stop being patient. It was time to be smart. The morning after that dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about how I'd gotten here. As I made Daniel's coffee strong, splash of cream, just how he'd liked it since high school, memories flooded back like water through a broken dam. 3 years ago, I'd been living comfortably in my 2-bedroom apartment overlooking Laurelhurst Park. Donald, my husband, had been gone for 5 years, but I'd built a life. Book club on Tuesdays, volunteer work at the library, lunch with my friend Ruth every Sunday after church. I had savings, a retirement plan, a future that was mine to shape. Then came that night when Daniel showed up at my door at 11:45 p.m., his face gaunt with worry. The construction business was failing. The bank was calling in loans. He could lose everything, the house, the company, his children's college funds. "I just need a bridge loan. Mom," for he'd said, gripping his coffee mug like a lifeline. 6 months, maybe a year. I've got contracts lined up, but I need capital to fulfill them." I'd written the check without hesitation. When that wasn't enough, I'd listed my apartment, $400,000 from the sale, plus most of my savings, nearly $500,000 in total. I'd kept only a small emergency fund and my pension. "You're a saint, Mom." Tiffany had gushed when they'd invited me to move in. "We'll take such good care of you. It'll be like having live-in help for each other." The first few months had been tolerable. I had my own space, contributed to the household, felt useful, but gradually, insidiously. Things shifted. My suggestions were ignored, then mocked. My presence went from appreciated to tolerated to resented. I started noticing things. Charges on the joint account I'd opened with Daniel for household expenses. Expensive dinners, shopping sprees, a weekend in Napa Valley, all while they complained about money being tight. When I questioned it, Daniel had turned cold. "We work hard. Mom, we deserve some enjoyment. Or do you think we should live like monks because you're here?" The isolation was deliberate. I realized now. Tiffany would answer my phone, telling my friends I was resting or having a bad day. She'd forget to give me messages. When Ruth called to confirm our Sunday lunch, Tiffany told her I'd been confused about dates lately, that it might be best to give Margaret some space while she adjusts. One by one, my connections faded. The book club stopped calling after I missed 3 meetings I'd never known about because Tiffany had deleted the emails to reduce your stress. Margaret, the library was told I'd had a fall and couldn't volunteer anymore. A complete lie. The worst part was watching it happen and feeling powerless to stop it. Every protest was met with concerned looks and whispers about my declining mental state. They'd created a narrative where I was a confused old woman, and any attempt to defend myself only seemed to confirm it. I discovered the financial betrayal by accident. I'd gone to the bank to withdraw cash and learned that Daniel had been slowly draining the joint account. 50 here, 100 there, then larger amounts. When confronted, he'd been defensive. It's for household expenses. Mom, do you think this house runs itself? The mortgage, utilities, food for 3 people. It adds up. Your little pension barely covers your share. My share. As if I were a tenant instead of the woman who'd saved his business, his home, his life as he knew it. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking. Receipts for luxury items hidden in Tiffany's purse, credit card statements showing vacations they'd taken while I stayed home, because travel would be too difficult for you. Margaret. The new car in the garage, a BMW. While they told me my Honda was an embarrassment and should be scrapped, they'd taken my money, my freedom, my friends, and were now working on taking my dignity. The nursing home brochures left casually on the kitchen counter. The loud discussions about powers of attorney when they thought I was napping. The bottle of sleeping pills Tiffany had brought home. In case your insomnia gets worse. Margaret, though I'd never complained of insomnia. Last month, I'd overheard the worst of it. Daniel was on the phone with someone, a lawyer from the context, discussing how to have me declared incompetent. She's definitely showing signs, he'd said. Confusion, forgetfulness, paranoia. My wife has documented several incidents. How long would the process take? That's when I'd started recording everything. That's when I'd decided that my silence about the lottery ticket wasn't just caution. It was ammunition, because they'd shown me who they were. Not the son I'd raised, who'd cried on my shoulder when his first business venture failed, who'd promised to take care of me as I'd taken care of him. Not the daughter-in-law who'd sworn I'd never be alone, that I was the mother she'd never had. They were strangers wearing familiar faces, and they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. They saw an old woman with nothing. They didn't see the teacher who'd managed classrooms of 30 children for 40 years. They didn't see the widow who'd navigated grief and rebuilt her life. They didn't see the mother who'd sacrificed everything and was prepared to teach them what that really meant. As I washed their breakfast dishes, listening to them plan their weekend trip to Seattle, Mom will be fine alone for a few days. She never goes anywhere anyway, I smiled. Let them plan. Let them scheme. Let them count their chickens before they hatched. Because I had 8.7 million reasons why their plans were about to crumble, and 40 years of teaching experience in making sure life's hardest lessons were never forgotten. That night, after the humiliating dinner, I waited until the house settled into sleep. Daniel's snoring drifted down the hall at 2:15 a.m., a sound I'd once found comforting when he was a baby with croup, keeping me awake with worry. Now it signaled safety of a different kind, the freedom to act without watchful eyes. I crept to my closet and pulled out the loose floorboard I discovered months ago. Beneath it lay my secrets, the lottery ticket, bank statements from my new account at a credit union across town, and a small key to a safety deposit box neither of them knew existed. $8.7 million. The number still seemed surreal, like a prayer I was afraid to speak aloud. I sat on my bed, holding the ticket up to the moonlight streaming through my small window. Such a small piece of paper to hold so much power. For a moment, I considered claiming it immediately, throwing the money in their faces, watching their expressions crumble. But no, that would be satisfaction without justice. They needed to learn, not just lose. The next morning, I called Ethan Cross from the library, using their phone so it wouldn't show on my cell records. Ethan had been Donald's best friend, a corporate lawyer who'd retired early but kept his license active for interesting cases. He'd always said, "Margaret?" His voice was warm with surprise. "It's been too long. How are you? I need your help. Ethan, but first, I need your absolute discretion." Of course, attorney-client privilege begins the moment you ask for my help. What's going on? I told him everything. The money I'd given Daniel, the treatment I'd endured, the lottery ticket, the recordings. The silence on his end grew heavier with each revelation. My God, Margaret. Why didn't you call sooner? I needed to be sure. I needed evidence. Smart woman. Can you meet me at my office tomorrow? Bring everything, recordings, bank statements, all of it. I'll need to be careful. They watch me. Tell them you're going to the doctor. I'll have my secretary call to confirm an appointment. Make it look legitimate. The next day, Tiffany barely looked up from her phone when I mentioned my appointment. Try not to be gone too long. I'm having the garden club over at 3, and I don't want you wandering in looking confused. At Ethan's office, I spread 3 years of pain across his conference table. Receipts, recordings, bank statements showing Daniel's withdrawals, photos of the nursing home brochures they'd left out, transcripts I'd made of overheard conversations. Ethan's expression darkened with each piece of evidence. Financial elder abuse, he said quietly. Isolation, emotional manipulation, attempted financial exploitation. Margaret, this is serious. We can file charges. I don't want charges. I want justice, and I want it to be perfect. He leaned back, studying me. You've thought this through. I've had 3 years to think. Here's what I want to do. I outlined my plan. First, claim the lottery winnings through a trust Ethan would set up, keeping my name hidden. Second, secretly purchase the house from the bank. Daniel had refinanced last year, and I discovered he was 3 months behind on payments. Third, set up the decoy account they could access, with just enough money to document their theft. Fourth, wait for them to make their move. You're setting a trap, Ethan said, a small smile playing at his lips. I'm teaching a lesson. They think I'm helpless. Ethan, they've told everyone I'm losing my mind. They're planning to put me in a home and take my pension. They need to learn what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. And the recordings? Insurance. But I'm hoping for something more dramatic. You mentioned your nephew works for Channel 7? Ethan's smile widened. Investigative reporter, always looking for stories about elder abuse. Very passionate about it since his grandmother was scammed. Perfect, but not yet. First, I need them to commit. Really commit. I want them to show everyone who they really are. Over the next month, I played my part flawlessly. I accidentally left bank statements out showing the decoy account with a balance of $30,000 money I'd claimed was from an old insurance policy of Donald's I'd forgotten about. I watched Tiffany's eyes light up when she saw it. I made small mistakes. Putting milk in the pantry, calling Daniel by Donald's name once, pretending to forget Tiffany's birthday. Each incident was carefully logged in what Tiffany thought was her secret notebook documenting my decline. Meanwhile, Ethan worked his magic. The lottery money was claimed quietly, deposited into a trust. The house purchase was negotiated through a shell company. Papers were drawn up, ready to be executed at a moment's notice. The best part was discovering I wasn't as alone as they'd made me believe. Ruth, my dear friend, had never stopped trying to reach me. When Ethan contacted her, she cried. I knew something was wrong, she said when we met secretly at Ethan's office. But that woman, she always had an answer. Margaret's sleeping, Margaret's confused, Margaret's having a bad day. I should have pushed harder. You couldn't have known, I assured her. They're very good at what they do, but now you can help me show everyone exactly what that is. The plan was in motion. The lottery ticket was claimed, the money secured, the house was mine in all but name. The evidence was cataloged and backed up in triplicate. Now all I needed was for Daniel and Tiffany to take the bait. They thought they were circling a helpless old woman, ready to pick her bones clean. They had no idea that the trap was set. The hunters had become the hunted, and the helpless old woman was about to teach them the last lesson they'd ever learn from her. The student was about to school the master manipulators at their own game. The trap began to close on a Tuesday morning. Tiffany approached me with papers and her sweetest smile, the one she reserved for getting what she wanted. Margaret, honey, she cooed, settling beside me on the couch with predatory grace. Daniel and I have been thinking. You know how you sometimes forget things? Well, we want to make sure you're protected. I let my hands tremble slightly as I reached for my reading glasses. Protected. It's called a financial power of attorney. It just means if you ever have trouble managing things, we can help. It's really for your own good. I studied the document, noting how comprehensive it was. They'd have control over everything: bank accounts, property, medical decisions. It was exactly what I'd expected. I don't understand all this legal language, I said, playing into their narrative. Maybe I should have someone look at it? Daniel appeared as if on cue, sitting on my other side. Mom, who would you have look at it? You don't know any lawyers, and honestly, this is family. Don't you trust us? The manipulation was textbook. I pretended to consider, then reached for the pen with a shaky hand. As I started to sign, I deliberately knocked over my teacup, sending liquid spreading across the papers. Oh no, I gasped, watching the ink blur and run. I'm so sorry. I've ruined it. Tiffany's jaw clenched, but she maintained her smile. It's fine. Margaret, accidents happen. I'll print new ones. That evening, I heard them arguing in their bedroom. She did it on purpose, Tiffany hissed. I'm telling you, she's not as far gone as we think. Don't be paranoid, Daniel replied. You saw her put the remote in the refrigerator yesterday. She's losing it. We just need to be patient. I smiled from my room. The remote incident had been particularly inspired. Over the next week, they escalated. Daniel started mentioning the decoy account casually, asking if I needed help managing all that money. Tiffany left her laptop open to nursing home websites, making sure I'd see them. They spoke in hushed tones about dates and deadlines, letting me catch fragments about next month and final arrangements. The masterstroke came when Tiffany suggested I update my will. Just to make sure everything is in order, she said, sliding a business card across the table. This lawyer specializes in elder law. He's very understanding about situations like yours. I called the number from my cell phone, making sure they could hear. What they didn't know was that Ethan was also on the line, listening through the conference feature I'd learned to use. The lawyer, Mr. Brennan, was oily smooth. Mrs. Hill, your family has expressed concerns about your capacity. Perhaps we should discuss putting your assets in a trust they can manage. What about my bank accounts? I asked innocently. All assets would be included for your protection, of course. Your son mentioned an account with substantial funds. Ethan texted me. Got him. Clear solicitation of financial elder abuse. Recording everything. I scheduled an appointment for the following week, then made my next move. I went to the decoy account and withdrew $5,000 in cash, making sure to do it when the bank was crowded, looking confused and taking a long time. The teller, trained to watch for elder abuse, made notes I could see her writing. Perfect. That night, I hid the cash in my room, but left $100 bill poking out from under my mattress, visible to anyone who looked. Tiffany found it during her weekly cleaning of my room, which was really her weekly search for information. Daniel, I heard her urgent whisper. She's hoarding cash. God knows how much she has hidden. They tore my room apart the next day while I was at doctor's appointment, really meeting with Ethan and the investigative reporter, Jake Morrison. I'd moved the real cash, of course, but left enough hidden in various spots for them to find about $800. When I returned home, my room looked exactly as I'd left it, but I knew better. The tiny pieces of thread I'd placed on drawer handles had been moved. The powder I'd sprinkled on the closet floor showed footprints. They'd been thorough. How was your appointment? Tiffany asked casually. Fine, though the doctor seemed concerned about something. He wants to run more tests. I watched calculation flicker across her face. Medical concerns meant potential medical power of attorney, another avenue of control. That weekend, they made their biggest move yet. Daniel approached with bank forms. Mom, I noticed you withdrew a large amount from your account. That's dangerous to keep cash around. Why don't we put it back? But add me to the account. That way I can help you manage things. Make sure you're not taken advantage of. Taken advantage of? I repeated slowly. Well, yes, there are people who prey on the elderly. Scammers, fake charities. I just want to protect you. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I signed the forms adding him to the decoy account, deliberately signing my name slightly wrong. When he pointed it out, I looked confused and tried again, succeeding on the third try. Within 2 days, Daniel had withdrawn half the money from the decoy account. The bank records showed transfers to his business account labeled loan repayment. He'd even written himself a backdated loan agreement, forging my signature. Ethan was ecstatic. This is perfect. Margaret, clear documentation of financial exploitation. But are you sure you want to wait? Almost, I told him. There's one more thing they need to do. That thing came the following Tuesday. I overheard Tiffany on the phone with Sunset Manor. Yes, we'd like to schedule a tour. My mother-in-law needs memory care. How soon could she move in? And you accept power of attorney for admissions? They were moving faster now, emboldened by their success with the money. What they didn't know was that Jake Morrison had been investigating Sunset Manor for substandard care and financial fraud. My story would fit perfectly into his exposé. The noose was tightening, but not around my neck. Every document they forged, every dollar they stole, every lie they told was another knot in the rope they were hanging themselves with. I sat in my small room that night, looking at the photo of Donald I kept on my nightstand. Almost time, my love, I whispered. Almost time to show them what happens when you mistake a teacher's patience for weakness. Tomorrow, they would tour Sunset Manor. Tomorrow, they would make their final plans. And tomorrow, I would spring the trap they'd walked into with such confident greed. The afternoon they returned from Sunset Manor, I was strategically placed in the living room, pretending to struggle with a crossword puzzle. They entered with barely contained excitement, speaking in those false, hushed tones meant to be overheard. "The memory care unit is perfect," Tiffany said, setting her purse down with a satisfied thump. "Secure, professional staff, and they start processing admissions immediately with proper documentation." Daniel nodded, pouring himself a scotch at 2:30 p.m., a celebration drink. The director was very understanding about the urgency. Apparently, sudden placement is common when families reach their breaking point. Breaking point. I penciled in a wrong answer, then erased it slowly. "Margaret." Tiffany approached with that practiced concern. "We need to talk. Daniel and I have been worried about you. The confusion, the money hidden around your room, the way you've been signing things incorrectly. We think it's time to consider getting you professional help." I looked up, letting my eyes water, a skill I'd perfected teaching kindergartners who needed to see empathy. Professional help? "Somewhere safe," Daniel added, sitting across from me, "where trained staff can manage your medications, help with daily activities. You wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore." "But this is my home," I whispered. "No, Mom." Daniel's voice hardened slightly. "This is our home. You're a guest here, and frankly, it's becoming too much. We found a nice place. Sunset Manor. You could move in as early as next week." "Next week?" I let my hand shake, dropping the pencil. "But my things, my doctor appointments. We'll handle everything," Tiffany assured me. "In fact, we've already started the paperwork. All we need is for you to sign a few forms." They produced a stack of documents, admission papers for Sunset Manor, medical power of attorney, and buried in the middle, a document granting them full access to all my accounts, including any they didn't know about. "I should read these," I said, reaching for my glasses. "Oh, Margaret," Tiffany laughed. "Do you really think you'd understand them? That's why you have us. We're protecting you." I signed slowly, deliberately making my signature shaky. What they couldn't see was that I was actually signing Margaret Hill null and void in cursive, so elaborate it looked like my normal signature. Ethan had assured me it would invalidate everything while still giving them enough rope to hang themselves. "There," Daniel said, gathering the papers quickly. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" That evening, I made my move. I called Daniel at 6:45 p.m. Sounding panicked, the bank called. I gasped. They said there's been suspicious activity on my account, large withdrawals. Daniel, I'm scared. What if someone stole my identity? I heard him pause, calculating. Don't worry, Mom, I'll handle it. Just don't talk to anyone else about it, okay? We don't want to cause unnecessary panic. Should I call the police? No. His response was too quick, too sharp. No, let me look into it first. It's probably just a misunderstanding. Perfect. He'd now admitted knowledge of the withdrawals on a recorded line. The next morning, I played my final card. I wandered into the kitchen where Tiffany was making her green smoothie, looking more confused than ever. Tiffany, dear, I said, I can't find my banking information, and there's a nice man on the phone saying he's from the IRS, saying I owe money. Should I give him my social security number? She grabbed the phone from me. No, Margaret, that's a scammer. She hung up and turned to Daniel. This is worse than we thought. She almost gave information to a scammer. We need to move quickly. I'll call Sunset Manor, Daniel said. See if we can move the admission date up. What they didn't know was that the scammer had been Jake Morrison, recording the entire interaction, including Tiffany inadvertently confirming that I was too impaired to handle financial decisions while they simultaneously were draining my accounts. That afternoon, Tiffany went out for her yoga class. Daniel was in his office. On the phone with Sunset Manor, I could hear fragments. Emergency admission rapidly deteriorating. Financial arrangements already in place. I picked up my phone and sent a single text to Ethan. Now. Within an hour, several things happened in quick succession. Ethan filed the emergency injunction preventing any transfer of assets or change in my living situation. Jake Morrison contacted Daniel and Tiffany for comment on a story about elder financial abuse. The bank froze the decoy account pending investigation of suspicious activity. But the masterpiece was yet to come. At 4:15 p.m., the doorbell rang. Daniel answered, and I heard voices. Ethan's calm baritone, another man's official tone, and a woman asking about camera placement. What's going on? Daniel demanded. Mr. Hill, Ethan said smoothly. I'm here representing your mother, Margaret Hill. This is Detective Bryant from the Elder Abuse Division and Jake Morrison from Channel 7. We have some questions about your recent financial activities regarding Mrs. Hill's accounts. The color drained from Daniel's face. My mother is confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. We have documentation. Documentation you procured under false pretenses? Ethan interrupted. We have recordings. Mr. Hill, bank records, evidence of systematic financial exploitation and attempted false imprisonment of a vulnerable adult. Tiffany's car pulled into the driveway. She emerged, saw the news van, and tried to retreat. The camera was already rolling. Mrs. Hill, Jake Morrison called out, can you comment on the allegations that you and your husband have stolen thousands from your elderly mother-in-law while planning to force her into a substandard care facility? This is ridiculous, she shrieked. That woman is senile. She doesn't know what day it is. Actually, I said, stepping into the doorway with perfect clarity. It's Thursday, October 26th, 4:22 p.m. I know exactly what day it is, what time it is, and exactly what you've been doing to me for the past 3 years. The shock on their faces was a masterpiece. The confused, elderly woman they dismissed stood straight-backed and clear-eyed, holding a folder of evidence. Shall we go inside? I suggested calmly. I believe you're about to receive an education in what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness and assume that age equals inability. As we filed into my living room in my house, I caught Daniel's eye. For just a moment, I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd cried when he'd accidentally broken my favorite vase. Then it was gone, replaced by the stranger who'd systematically tried to destroy me. Mom, he started, but I held up my hand. No, you had 3 years to call me Mom with love instead of manipulation. Now you'll hear exactly what your greed has cost you, and believe me, the lesson is just beginning. The living room had never felt smaller. Daniel and Tiffany sat rigid on the sofa they'd bought with my money. While Detective Bryant positioned himself by the door, Jake Morrison's cameraman found the perfect angle to capture their stricken faces. and Ethan stood beside my chair like a guardian angel in a three-piece suit. "Let's start with the facts," Ethan began, opening his briefcase with theatrical precision. "Mrs. Hill, would you please state your current mental status for the record?" I smiled, the kind of smile I used to give students who thought they could fool me with forged absence notes. "My name is Margaret Louise Hill. I'm 72 years old, of completely sound mind, and in possession of all my faculties. I have documentation from Dr. Patricia Morrison, neurologist at Cedars-Sinai, confirming I have no cognitive impairment whatsoever." "That's impossible," Tiffany sputtered. "We saw you put dish soap in the washing machine. You called Daniel by your dead husband's name." "Performance art," I said simply. "Every confused moment carefully orchestrated. The soap incident? I was testing whether you'd help me or document it for your files. You chose documentation." Ethan pulled out a tablet, swiping to a video. "This is from the nanny cam, Mrs. Hill installed in her room 3 months ago." The screen showed Tiffany rifling through my drawers, finding the planted cash. "Notice the date stamp. This was right after Mrs. Hill deliberately mentioned her insurance money within your hearing." Daniel's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Mom, this is entrapment." "No," Detective Bryant interjected. "Entrapment requires law enforcement to induce criminal behavior. Your mother simply revealed what you were already willing to do. Speaking of which, Mr. Hill, would you like to explain these withdrawals from the account you were added to?" He produced bank statements showing every transfer Daniel had made. $50,000 in 2 weeks. Listed as loan repayments for loans that never existed. "She owes us," Daniel exploded, jumping to his feet. "Do you have any idea how much we've spent taking care of her, housing her, feeding her, dealing with her constant needs?" "Interesting," I said, producing my own folder, "because I have receipts showing I paid for 70% of the groceries, all of my medical expenses, utilities when you forgot to pay them, and gave you $480,000 3 years ago. Would you like to see the canceled checks?" Jake Morrison stepped forward. "Mr. Hill, Mrs. Hill, we're preparing a segment on elder financial abuse. Would you care to comment on why you attempted to have your mother declared incompetent while stealing her money? Turn that camera off." Tiffany shrieked. "This is harassment. We'll sue." "Please do," Ethan said mildly. "Discovery would be fascinating. Shall we discuss the forged signatures on the power of attorney documents? Or perhaps the conversation with Sunset Manor, where you claimed your mother was suffering from advanced dementia?" I stood, walking to the mantelpiece where their family photos sat, photos I wasn't in, despite living here for 3 years. But the real revelation is this. I turned, savoring the moment. "This house you're sitting in? The one you've made me feel unwelcome in every single day? I own it." The silence was deafening. "That's impossible," Daniel whispered. "The mortgage is in my name." "Was," Ethan corrected. "You were 3 months behind on payments. My client purchased it from the bank through a trust 2 weeks ago. You've been living in her house, plotting to throw her out of her own property." "How?" Tiffany's voice cracked. "Where did you get that kind of money?" I pulled out my phone, showing them a photo of the lottery ticket. $8.7 million after taxes. Won it 6 months after moving in here. I could have left immediately. Bought a mansion, lived like a queen. Instead, I stayed. Do you know why? They stared at me, speechless. Because I needed to know if my son, the boy I raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, had any love left for me, any gratitude, any basic human decency. You failed every test. You tested us? Daniel's voice was hollow. Every day, every small kindness I could have received but didn't. Every moment you could have chosen love over greed. Remember last Christmas? I gave you both handmade scarves because you said I couldn't afford anything else. You threw them in the donation box before New Year's. I know because I found them at Goodwill and bought them back. Tears ran down my face now, but my voice remained steady. I would have given you everything, the lottery money, this house, every penny if you had just treated me like a mother instead of a burden. If you had shown 1 ounce of the love I showed you. Mom, please, Daniel started, but I cut him off. Detective Bryant, are there charges to file? Multiple counts of financial elder abuse, fraud, attempted false imprisonment. With the evidence provided, prosecution is virtually guaranteed. And Jake, I continued, when does this air? With your permission, tomorrow night, elder abuse is drastically underreported. Your story could help thousands. Tiffany stood abruptly. You can't do this to us. We're family. No, I said quietly. Family doesn't drug their mother's tea to make her seem confused. Yes, I had it tested. Family doesn't tell her friends she's too ill for visitors. Family doesn't plot to lock her away while stealing her life savings. You're not family. You're criminals who happen to share my DNA. Ethan stepped forward with an eviction notice. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises. Mrs. Hill is generously not pressing for immediate removal, though she has every right to. Where will we go? Daniel asked desperately. Mom, we have nowhere. Perhaps Sunset Manor has a room available, I suggested. I hear they're very understanding about urgent situations. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. As Detective Bryant read them their rights, and Jake Morrison captured every moment. I felt 40 years of teaching experience crystallize into this single lesson. Sometimes the most important education comes not from kindness rewarded, but from consequences delivered. One more thing, I said as they were led toward the door. The grandson you never let me see? My lawyer has already contacted your ex-wife, Melissa. Turns out she's been documenting your behavior too. Custody hearings start next month, and I'll be testifying about everything. The last thing I saw before they were escorted out was Daniel's face, the mask of the loving son finally, completely shattered, revealing the stranger he'd chosen to become. The door closed, and for the first time in 3 years, I was home. The house felt different with them gone, not empty, peaceful, like a classroom after the troublemakers have been sent to the principal's office. I stood in the kitchen at 6 a.m., making coffee in my favorite mug, the one Tiffany had hidden in the back cabinet because it was too ugly for guests to see. The doorbell rang at 7. Ruth stood on my porch with a casserole dish and tears in her eyes. I saw the news, she said simply. I'm so sorry I didn't push harder to see you. You couldn't have known. I embraced my dear friend. They were very good at their deception, but that's over now. Over the next weeks, my life transformed. Friends who'd been told I was too ill for visitors came by daily. My nephew flew in from Portland, furious he'd been told I didn't want contact. The garden club ladies who'd heard Tiffany's lies about my deteriorating condition brought flowers and apologies. But the best moment came when Melissa arrived with my grandson, little Tommy, now 8 years old. Grandma! He ran into my arms and I held him like the treasure he was. Mom says we can visit every week now. Is that true? As often as you like, sweetheart, I promised, blinking back tears. Jake Morrison's segment aired to record viewership, the image of Tiffany screaming, "That woman is senile," followed immediately by my calm, articulate response became viral. Calls poured in from families experiencing similar situations, from lawyers specializing in elder abuse, from organizations wanting to help. I established the Margaret Hill Foundation with $5 million from the lottery winnings. Its mission? To provide legal assistance and safe housing for elderly victims of family financial abuse. Ethan agreed to run the legal division pro bono. You know, he said one afternoon as we reviewed applications for help. Most people would have just taken the money and disappeared, started fresh somewhere else. I'm a teacher, I reminded him. We don't run from problems. We create lesson plans. Daniel and Tiffany were convicted on multiple counts. The judge, citing the particularly heinous nature of exploiting a parent's love, sentenced them to 2 years in prison and full restitution. The local news covered every moment of their perp walk. Their designer clothes replaced with orange jumpsuits. I attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row with Ruth and Melissa. When Daniel took the stand, trying to paint himself as a stressed caregiver pushed too far. I simply held up the photo of the scarves they'd donated. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. 3 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving in my home. Really my home. Tommy helped me set the table while Melissa made my mother's stuffing recipe. My nephew and his family drove down from Portland. Ruth brought her famous pecan pie. Even Marcus from the corner store stopped by with flowers. "Miss M," he said, "I always knew you were lucky. I just didn't know you were brilliant, too." As we sat around the table, Tommy asked, "Grandma, why did Uncle Daniel try to hurt you?" I considered my answer carefully. Teacher instincts never fading. Sometimes, sweetheart, people let greed become stronger than love. They forget that family isn't about what you can take. It's about what you give. Is that why you gave away so much money to help other grandmas and grandpas? Exactly. I ruffled his hair. The best revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's making sure they can never hurt anyone else. That night, I sat in my living room, and opened my laptop. The foundation had received another dozen applications for help, each one a story of trust betrayed, love exploited, dignity stolen, each one a chance to turn pain into purpose. I thought about Daniel, spending Thanksgiving in a federal prison. Part of me, the mother's heart that never fully dies, ached for the boy he'd been. But the woman he'd forced me to become knew this was justice. Not revenge, but consequence. Not cruelty, but education. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hill, you don't know me, but I saw your story. My children are trying to do the same thing to me. I've been pretending to be confused like you did. Tomorrow, I'm calling a lawyer. Thank you for showing me I'm not crazy and I'm not alone." I smiled, typing back, "You're not alone, and you're stronger than they think. Remember, we're not just survivors. We're teachers, and class is in session." Outside, the sun set over my garden, the one I'd tended while they plotted against me. Tomorrow, the foundation would help 3 more families. Tomorrow, another predator would learn that gray hair doesn't mean gray matter has disappeared. Tomorrow, another elder would stand up and say, "No more." But tonight, in my house, with my freedom, surrounded by the love of real family, I was exactly where I belonged. The burden they'd tried to discard had become a force they never saw coming. The woman they'd tried to erase had rewritten the entire story. And this teacher's final lesson was simple. Never underestimate the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose and 8.7 million reasons to win. Class dismissed. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect with fellow listeners around the world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on Margaret's journey. What would you have done in her situation?